farther we get from the SoundCloud era, the more we lose perspective of how monumental that period was. The iconography and signifiers of a changing musical landscape was evident, even if you were just passing by with a glance. Extravagantly layered tattoos, sensationalized drug use, unrelenting live shows, and jewelry and diamonds that made T-Pain's big-ass chain more poignant than ever. XXXTentacion, Ski Mask the Slump God, Ugly God, Lil Pump, and Lil Yachty are just a few of the poster children for this age. But this is also the visual facade that the SoundCloud era was mischaracterized by, because lying underneath were underground rap dynasties that would soon become cornerstones of the music entertainment business. To separate and analyze the mid to late 2010 SoundCloud era by artist and genre would honestly take hours, if not the whole day, as there was an exorbitant amount of talent that new jargon and subgenres were rising up every few months. Think of it like a two-toned funnel, labeled music as rap because there are drums and rhyming, then classified as SoundCloud rap because, well, it's new and on this independent music platform. But then where do you go from there? You get oppository figures, take for example Lil Peep and Lil Uzi Vert. They may share some tonal similarities in subject matter, but they both take wildly different approaches from a musical and stylistic way. Peep characterized the emo trap subgenre, where Uzi represented the mumble rap scene at the time before obviously becoming too big to throw a label on. Tread, drill, cloud rap, plug, and more subgenres were starting to see more traction than ever before, and this was before they were labeled with these familiar terms. And with so much to represent musically and culturally, it didn't help that blogs and media commentators were essentially baking in on the idea of bundling all of this talent under the SoundCloud rap moniker. Just look at the 2016 and 2017 XXL freshman class cover and videos labeled the New Wave and Generation Next respectively, where almost all of the rappers were so animated, identifiable, and characteristic that they all stood out as much as they muddled together. What made them stand out though was their sound. What made them stand out from the rest of the rappers to get to this point though, for many it was a mixture of all of it. Invigorating music, rampant energy, visual aesthetic, sonic aesthetic. I mean, there were plenty of tools to carve out your own success as an artist. It just happened to be whether you would make it or not. And that's also if you're purely a rapper, but what if you're more R&B? R&B was nestled between a rock and a hard place during the SoundCloud era, as having a beautiful singing voice would typically get you snagged up by a label, taking you outside of the SoundCloud space with the resources allocated by these labels. But let's say you choose to go independent, you also don't have the same signifiers of a SoundCloud rapper in that moniker, making you automatically less identifiable than the competition, and on top of all of this, you have to give a reason for people to listen to you as opposed to these signed artists and people that might be in your stylistic lane like Jeremiah, Tory Lanez, or even Rihanna. But illuminated from behind the era's clout and punk rock energy was an artist that didn't really fit the mold of everyone else, and not because of a lack of talent or audience approval, but because of having such a dynamically advanced sound, one that isn't really thought of much when discussing SoundCloud rap. PnBRock may not be the first or second artist you think of when you think of the SoundCloud era, but he proved to be not only an appealing hybrid of harmonious R&B singing and rapping, but also some of the more impressive rapping to come out of Philadelphia since the likes of Meek Mill. Talent doesn't put you on the map though, and neither do cosigns necessarily, but rather a song or two that proves your worth in the means of getting eyes and ears on you, drawing valuable comparisons, and giving audiences a taste of what your artistry is all about. For PnBRock, that song was Fleek, and it came after 3 full mixtapes of sonic consistency and seamless flow of R&B and rapping, as the song proved his ability to make a hit and thwarted his momentum projecting towards success. And you guessed it, SoundCloud was the primary place where users were accessing his music, as Fleek totaled around 20 million streams on the platform as of right now. The Wayback Machine on the internet shows that in November of 2015, he had just over 10,000 YouTube subscribers, while in December of 2015, he had well over 30,000 SoundCloud followers. While not the greatest metric, it proves that his 3 R&B mixtapes were not only finding their audience, but also garnering PnBRock plenty of new supportive fans. Also worth noting is that he was signed to Atlantic Records for the 3rd R&B installment, giving him a wider reach and budget to amplify his voice. So PnBRock was a bit ahead of the curve in terms of the SoundCloud era so-called golden era, but his popularity hitting the mainstream strides during similar times as Migos, Uzi, Thug, T Grizzly, Kodak Black, and many more, it put him in an unfair crossroads of sorts. Is he rap? Is he R&B? Is he binding himself to the appeal of other rappers, or is he gonna try and become the next Trey Songz? The Philly native chose neither, as just his first single under Atlantic and Empire proved to not only be a success, but arguably the biggest hit of his entire career. Selfish swooped in as the R&B ballad that could be played on rap, pop, and R&B radio stations, and no one minded. PnB's fearless commitment to his unique blending of already synchronous genres paid off in a really big way, and the floodgates opened and stayed that way for the rapper, as the song stayed on the Billboard Hot 100 for a whopping 19 weeks, which is almost a third of the entire year. Mind you, this was all taking place during the rise of all the SoundCloud trap legends. PnB had an early start and took heavy advantage of it, and with Selfish being the premature hit of his career, expectations were rightfully high at the time. Having already laid the groundwork for his vocal range and separation from the imagery and visuals behind the typical SoundCloud rappers, he was clearly sought after by a lot in the industry. So a collaboration was bound to happen. And if you're a popping rapper at the time, why wouldn't you want fresh young talent who's already got the world's eyes and ears on him? Well, Kodak Black actually got the message, and YFN Lucci did as well. Thankfully for both of them, PnBRock dropped off some of the best features that the industry was graced with that year. Too Many Years off of Kodak Black's Lil Big Pac album was not only the biggest song off that album, but was also Kodak's most streamed song even in early 2017, with the album dropping mid-June the year prior. The other monumental, arguably larger feature was his integral moments on YFN Lucci's Everyday We Lit, which to this day is still YFN Lucci's most streamed song ever by over 100 million streams. Yeah, like 100 million above the song that's number 2 for him. And outside of the outrageously impressive statistics lies one of the best songs of that year, and it set a standard for PnBRock essentially taking over any feature that he had a song with, but never overshadowing the lead artist, instead working with them and using his versatility to both of their advantages. It always worked when there was somebody else handling a part of the song that PnBRock would lay off with, for example, the rapping and the R&B. It made for a hit almost every time. The year that followed not only saw further mainstream approval and achievements, but a more coveted means of being ushered into the spotlight as a successful rapper. He dropped his second mixtape project under Atlantic titled Going Through the Motions, and while the album didn't produce a similar viral hit like Selfish, that wasn't exactly the point. It was seeing if he could further capitalize on that song's widespread acclaim and popularity, and the Spotify streaming numbers show that he had handfuls of songs from the album that struck a chord with tens of millions, even if that was just a fraction of his lead singles numbers. Almost and strangely more impactful for his career was his song on the Fate of the Furious soundtrack titled Horses, featuring A Boogie and Kodak Black. And look, songs off these Fast and Furious albums are literally always a shot in the dark because they're almost never really that good, but if they find their audience, and you know the audience is pretty much anybody and everybody, they'll go platinum or double platinum if you're PnBRock, as both his song and Post Malone's Candy Paint were listened to and remembered far beyond the annual franchise's entry was. But barely a month after Horses, PnBRock saw himself getting that stamp of approval in hip-hop as he was enlisted in the 2017 XXL freshman class dubbed Generation Next, alongside rappers whose careers vary in recognition, notability, and legacy just a half a decade later. And while being on the list is the ultimate resume booster, especially for someone who doesn't exactly benefit from the impressions that come from being on it, he wasn't exactly a freshman in the game either. Closer towards the end of 2017 saw PnBRock dropping his first album under Atlantic titled Catch These Vibes, which again reaffirmed the fact that PnB had an audience even without a hit single going into it, as the tracks Lovin' with A Boogie, Issues with Russ, TTM with Wiz and Nightmare, as well as Feelin's, each have almost over 50 million streams respectively. It's hard to say why the album dropped the same year as his first one, and while it was 9 months after Going Through the Motions, it still felt rapid, but you know, it clearly worked to his advantage of giving his audience more and more to consume, and that was the time when, you know, albums were being bundled together and as many songs were being layered on them as they could. The years leading up to 2022 found PnBRock performing, dropping 2 more albums, and delivering some more viral features. But nothing of note really occurred in his career musically that would tune somebody in had they not already discovered who PnBRock was. The only outlier in this is the aforementioned viral feature, which was on the Ed Sheeran song Cross Me featuring Chance the Rapper and himself from summer of 2019. I remember seeing the 3 names together on one song and kind of wincing at the screen, and that was years before Kodak Black and Ed even linked up. But you know, it's Ed Sheeran, the #1 most streamed artist in the world, so of course it has over 350 million streams on Spotify alone. Shortly before this was his album Trapstar turned Popstar, which saw his biggest album debut to date, peaking at #4 on the Billboard 200 charts, including the hit songs Middle Child with X and I Like Girls with Lil Skies, both earning over 100 million streams each. And like I said earlier, this was during the period of albums being immensely long for the sake of streaming numbers, and that's a trend that's sadly still ongoing, but this had handfuls of songs on the album just get forgotten amongst the rest, which is the problem here, is that the popular ones might stand out to you, to a fan, but if you're going into this blindly and you see over 20 songs on an album, you're gonna feel overwhelmed. But at the same time, numbers don't lie, and the musical connections and friendships that PnBRock had built over the years with working with so many people were paying off time and time again. The artist PnBRock worked with is always something that surprised me, and not because of a disliking for him, but for someone who wasn't really on my radar, to work with so many people who were was interesting to see. And I'm just gonna give you a short list here, as PnBRock has worked with Meek Mill, XXXTentacion, Kodak Black, A Boogie, Migos, NBA Youngboy, Lil Baby, Lil Yachty, Lil Durk, Lil Wayne, Pop Smoke, Kevin Hart, Ed Sheeran, and more. And that's proof enough that while his next two albums didn't perform as well as his predecessors, the talent was clear with PnBRock, and his R&B fueled choruses he could blanket on top of your favorite rapper's song. That being said, SoundCloud Days, which is PnBRock's final album under Atlantic, was released in 2022, and there was an interesting experiment for a signed rapper, trying what the kids are doing, plug-and-be infused hypertrap beats and all, enlisting newcomers like Jace and Young Fazo. PnBRock had a clear infatuation with what the younger generation was bringing to the SoundCloud scene and layering upon, but I think he was just a bit too late in showing that appreciation, as the album itself doesn't have one of its 12 songs ranking even close to 1 million streams. But PnBRock had been tuned in with much of the contemporary underground scene, showing support for and listening to artists like Jace, Summers, and others who he clearly had an infatuation with and saw something special in, which, as an artist who's already seen the success that they are about to see, is essentially being a mentor to those coming up, which is always a great thing. And just a few weeks ago, he dropped the single Love Me Again, which has Spotify artist pick message labeled on his profile stating, "My first independent release since 2015, making the recent news of his passing all the more tragic." And truly, it's tragically ironic knowing that someone who proved himself to audiences of pop, rap, R&B, and everything in between found something to like about PnBRock. He knew that better than anyone, though, as his ability to quickly alternate between different vocal cadences and stylings essentially made him a double-edged sword, as mold didn't fit the SoundCloud era that he happened to be popping during, but he still found himself on that XXL freshman list like the rest of them did. And instead of offering slight variations to what the artist next to him did, PnBRock didn't settle for whichever lane was easiest to take. He instead created his own path, gradually helping with R&B's continued appreciation within the mainstream, and giving his dedicated fans and newcoming artists a style and cadence that wasn't like many others in the industry.